Hello everybody and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Video Clips, and just a reminder about a couple things. If you live in Central Ohio, we are doing cooking classes and just food-oriented events, once in a while a movie on Tuesday night at 6 at our office. So if you live any place in the Central Ohio area and you want to stop in, you'd like to be around some like-minded humans, we are those like-minded humans, so come and visit us please. Another thing is the classes we're offering fall semester are Chemistry 1, so people who are enrolled in our nutrition program would be taking that class, Plant-Based Nutrition and Health. That's also part of our nutrition educator program. Meal planning for all kinds of special needs, ranging from religious observations to economic disadvantage and etc. The Diet and Lifestyle Intervention course, which is a great overview for health professionals and others who want to just look at the global picture of informed decision making and diet and lifestyle change. And then I'm teaching a class called Cancer 201, which is a review of the most commonly discussed alternative treatments in cancer. And so if you're interested in those classes, let us know, pampopper@msn.com. And if you want to have the bigger discussion about how some of these things might fit in with developing a career in this field, I'm happy to schedule a time to talk to you about that too. So I have a whole list of topics I want to cover today, all related to COVID, of course, but not necessarily related to each other than their COVID. So anyway, I wanted to start with Denmark, which has one of the lowest COVID-19 death rates in the world. And as of August 4th, there were a total of 616 deaths, less than 1/3 the number of people who die from pneumonia or flu in any year in Denmark. So they've done a pretty good job. However, the Danes are being criticized because by countries like the United States because they do not wear masks, and health authorities in Denmark don't recommend them. They say there's little conclusive evidence that face masks are an effective way to reduce the spread of viruses. And I still have posted on our website at WellnessForumHealth.com the screenshot of the CDC's study that shows that too. So Denmark's not the only country, by the way. 80 to 90% of people in Finland and Holland also never wear masks. Dutch officials say no evidence whatsoever that they're medically protective. They're not even recommending it. Some health officials in these countries are saying that the masks could actually make people sicker and help to spread the virus. No masks in Sweden. Dentists are starting to sound the alarm about masks causing mask mouth, which includes inflammation and gum disease and increased risk of stroke and heart attacks. So the mask issue is still not completely settled at all. And so I would advise you to go to our website, WellnessForumHealth.com, and do check out what the Centers for Disease Control says about wearing masks in view of this information, because I think it's always good to consult our own health authorities on this, and I think you'll be really interested in what you find. Speaking of the Centers for Disease Control, they just published very recently some information on mental health during the COVID-19 debacle. According to the CDC, by late June, 40% of American adults were struggling with mental health or substance abuse issues, specifically as a result of the lockdowns, social distancing, stay-at-home orders, and all of that. Anxiety and depression, 31%. Started or increased substance abuse or use, 13%. Trauma, stressor-related disorder symptoms, 26%, and seriously considered suicide, 11%. Younger adults, racial, ethnic minorities, essential workers, and unpaid adult caregivers reported having experienced disproportionately worse mental health outcomes, increased substance abuse, and elevated suicidal ideation. This is right from the Centers for Disease Control's website. The prevalence of symptoms of anxiety disorder was approximately 3 times those reported in the second quarter of 2019, and the prevalence of depressive disorder was approximately 4 times that recorded in the second quarter of 2019. Approximately twice as many respondents reported serious consideration of suicide in the previous 30 days than in 2018, referring to the previous 12 months. So the Centers for Disease Control has data showing that what we've been doing from a health perspective in this country is not helping everybody from a health perspective. 40% of adults are struggling with the emotional and psychological problems. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned this for a while actually, but we have a marvelous therapist who is conducting telephone group sessions very inexpensively, one for specifically COVID-related issues, people who are dealing with joblessness and disagreements with friends over some of the information that they're sharing, and disconnection from family, that sort of thing. And then we have another group that focuses on anxiety and depression that were pre-existing before COVID, might have been exacerbated by it, but the problems go a little further back than COVID. And if you're a member, it's really inexpensive, but even for non-members, it's really inexpensive because we realize that people really need this kind of help and support right now. This comes from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Trying to cite reputable sources here so we make sure everybody knows the information is accurate. Since January 2020, JAMA and the JAMA Network journals have received hundreds of manuscripts and direct queries related to coronavirus disease, COVID-19, including research reports, case series and case reports, and opinion pieces. The editors have become aware that some of the patients described in some of these manuscripts, sometimes with overlapping authorship, have been reported in more than one submission. The inclusion of the same patients in more than one report has not been clearly indicated in the submitted manuscripts. This is of concern and may represent a lapse in ethical standards of scientific reporting. I'm reading you directly what the article says in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Reporting of the same patients in different articles without clear indication of the duplicate reporting creates an inaccurate scientific record, may affect the accuracy of subsequent estimates of the prevalence of the disease or outcomes, and may preclude valid meta-analyses unless authors of the meta-analyses are able to obtain individual patient data to ensure that patients are not being counted more than once in any publication. The potential for harm that could accrue from this type of misleading reporting is particularly concerning for studies of COVID-19. They're related to a rapidly evolving pandemic with only limited information available for decision making, so that inaccurate data and analyses not only affect understanding the disease and its epidemiology, but have the potential to result in inappropriate changes in clinical care, ineffective public health responses, exacerbations of the economic consequences from the epidemic, and increasing anxiety about the pandemic. We recognize the important efforts of authors in rapidly communicating information to the clinical and scientific community. However, we urge all authors of reports related to COVID-19 to clearly identify if any patients in any submitted manuscript have been reported and previous submissions or publications. So, some concern about overstating the cases is expressed by the Journal of the American Medical Association. Apparently, I'm not the only person who's concerned about it. Other people are too. I'm going to finish with this. Last week I talked about some scary doctors who think that you just do whatever you have to do, including limit services and the ability to participate in society in order to get people to get the vaccine, because after all, they know what's best for us. This is even more appalling. According to ethics professor Parker Crutchfield at Western Michigan University, psychoactive morality pills should be used in order to alter the behavior of those skeptical of lockdown regulations. He suggests that these drugs could be made compulsory or administered secretly via the water supply in order to gain cooperation. I'm not kidding. The article was published earlier this week in The Conversation, a news site focusing on content, quote, sourced from the academic and research community, end of quote, and supported by universities from around the world. Crutchfield says that when someone chooses not to follow public health guidelines around the coronavirus, they're defecting from the public good, and that such defectors require chemical moral enhancement substances to help them reason about what the right thing to do is. To me, it seems the problem of coronavirus defectors could be solved by moral enhancement, he writes. Like receiving a vaccine to beef up your immune system, people could take a substance to boost their cooperative pro-social behavior. Could a psychoactive pill be the solution to the pandemic, he writes? It's a far-out proposal that's bound to be controversial, he concedes, you think? But nevertheless, is one Crutchfield believes is worth at least considering given the importance of social cooperation in the struggle to get COVID-19 under control. He says that one challenge in implementing such a system is that the defectors who need moral enhancement are also the least likely to sign up for it. As some have argued, he goes on to write, a solution would be to make moral enhancement compulsory or administer it secretly, perhaps via the water supply. These actions require weighing other values, he writes. The chemicals mentioned by Crutchfield, by the way, were oxytocin and psilocybin, the active component of magic mushrooms, which he says, quote, may cause a person to be more empathetic and altruistic, more giving and generous. He says that his research in bioethics focuses, I don't think this guy has any ethics, but, focuses on questions like how to induce those who are non-cooperative to get on board with doing what's best for the public good. I can't even believe that this is actually something that an academic, still employed by the way, I checked, these people don't lose their job when they suggest that drugging people without their knowledge to get them to do what the government wants them to do is okay. Hard to believe that this guy's still employed, but anyway. So some Twitter users, I found this online, and some Twitter users that were appalled did some research, and they found other articles that this charming guy has written that I think you might find fascinating. He posted a 2019 paper called Compulsory Moral Bioenhancement Should Be Covert. And here's what the abstract of this paper says. Some theorists argue that moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory. I take this argument one step further, arguing that if moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory, then its administration ought to be covert rather than overt. This is to say that it is morally preferable for compulsory moral bioenhancement to be administered without the recipients knowing that they're receiving the enhancement. My argument for this is that if moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory, then its administration is a matter of public health. And for this reason, it must be governed by public health ethics. I argue that the covert administration of a compulsory moral bioenhancement program better conforms to public health ethics than does an overt compulsory program. In particular, he says, a covert compulsory program promotes values such as liberty, utility, equality, and autonomy better than an overt program does. Thus, a covert compulsory moral bioenhancement program is morally preferable. So this isn't a new idea that started since COVID-19. This guy just seems to think that when public health authorities decide that you should do something, they should just do whatever they have to do to get you to do it, including drugging you. Another is titled, another one of his charming articles, It is better to be ignorant of moral enhancement. A reply to Zambrano. Apparently somebody challenged him on this. Thank God somebody out there is thinking. And he says, in a recent issue of Bioethics, I argued that compulsory moral bioenhancement should be administered covertly. Alexander Zambrano has criticized this argument on two fronts. First, contrary to my claims, Zambrano claims that the prevention of ultimate harm by covert moral bioenhancement fails to meet conditions for permissible, liberty-restricting public health interventions. Second, contrary to my claim, Zambrano claims that covert moral bioenhancement undermines autonomy to a greater degree than does overt moral bioenhancement. In this paper, I rebut both of these arguments, then finish by noting important avenues of research that this guy's arguments motivate. LifeSite News has written to Crutchfield to ask him whether he believes that the covert administration of psychoactive, morally enhancing chemicals is in keeping with the U.S. Constitution, and he has failed to respond to that. So even when challenged by a thinking human being who says maybe drugging people without their knowledge so that you can easily coerce them into doing things that you want them to do is not a good idea, his response isn't to have a debate about it. He just says people don't understand the importance of following directions from public health officials, and people wonder why I continue to compare this to what's gone on in other despotic regimes, like when Hitler was in charge of Germany and Europe, and Stalin in Russia, and Mao in China, and Fidel Castro. That's what these, in Venezuela, that's what these people do. We will get people to obey, regardless of what we have to do to get them to obey. And who they obey is the person or persons in charge, not elected officials, by the way. Nobody elected these health officials. And they're resigning in droves, by the way, and I do suspect that the reason is that some of them are concerned about keeping their medical licenses, and I think they should be, because I think one of the one of the consequences of all of this, once we start climbing out of the abyss that we've been in for a long time, is going to be that these people are going to be prosecuted. So I think some of the government officials will be prosecuted too. So anyway, such interesting people, doctors and researchers who think that we just should force Americans to do whatever we think they should do. And who appointed those 3 doctors last week in charge of our lives? Nobody elected them. Nobody elected this moron, and nobody elected these health directors that have been in control of our lives for so long. We really have to take back our country, folks. I mean, this is just horrific, and it's being taken seriously by some people, unfortunately. All right, well, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to other people who you think would enjoy getting educated. Visit our website at WellnessForumHealth.com so you can see what the CDC has to say about mask wearing. I think that's really important to do, if you know what I mean. And also visit MakeAmericans.freeagain.com. Check out all the good things that we have going on there, including a good news section, because we need good news so that we can feel motivated all day long to continue the fight. All right, talk to you tomorrow. We'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.